This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Well, welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm your host. And helping take our leadership to the next level, we have Dr. Richard Blackaby
I'm
in
here.
the studio.
I'm here for you and all others there, Sam.
Well, we appreciate you, Dr. Blackaby, and one of many Dr. Blackabys.
Yes, you might need to narrow it down a bit more.
Yeah, Dr. Richard Blackaby. Well, you have just come in off the road, and you're still on the road. You're still heading out not too long from now.
Yeah.
But you've had a very, very busy spring, and I think we've mentioned that in podcasts before, and so we sort of snag these talks when we can. But I thought what we would do today is, because you are on the road so much, you're seeing a lot of different people, you're speaking in a lot of different venues, in churches and associations for business leaders, and really all over the country, and even a handful of countries. So you're in different states all over the place. So I thought we'd just sort of have a chat about what you're seeing on the road. You get to talk to a lot of different people. You're in a lot of different areas, and maybe just some things some observations, let's say, from the road.
Yeah.
That you've been seeing. Maybe there's some common themes that have cropped up as you meet with people.
Yeah, and as you know, Sam, it has been pretty crazy. The springtime and the fall are particularly busy for me. But
yeah,
I think a week ago I spoke in 3 different states, 11 times I think that week, and just finished up 7 times this week in 2 states, and I'll be dealing with marketplace leaders and then church leaders, and just a wide variety of different settings. And so, not that I'm necessarily like I'm going to fill stadiums with people to hear me, but I'm staying really busy with opportunities to speak here and there, and so I'm just seeing lots of things going on as I travel around and talk to people. And so, we thought it might be just good to just share a few things I'm seeing. And a lot of times, you're racing from here to there, and you're talking to people, and you're picking up all kinds of things. And then sometimes it's good just to process a little bit and say, what am I hearing?
So this is as much for you as it is.
Yeah, it's like let me kind of stop and get a few thoughts together here. And what are some of the common threads that people keep talking about?
And I think the encouraging thing about this too is that for a lot of us, we're not traveling and especially not seeing different churches. We may travel, but we may not visit other churches and see what's happening. And so I think it's a really unique perspective that you bring, because you are in and out of a lot of different churches, associations, various organizations. And I just think it's encouraging and cool to see. So what's God doing in these places? Are some of the things that I'm feeling, at my church, are those, being reflected at other churches? And so I think it's just a really neat opportunity.
Yeah, well, let me just give you a couple of thoughts, and these will be pretty random as they're pretty raw at this point, but I think some things are pretty self-evident, but just to state them anyway, because that's what I'm seeing. One is, I think that change is accelerating, and that's not breaking news. But as someone who travels, I'm thinking even various protocols that I would go through, whether it's going through security at an airport, whether it's the way that your app works on your your airline, the way hotels treat you, so many things keep on changing that if you get really, and when you travel a lot, you tend to want to try to get routines down. It just saves time and energy. It helps you remember everything. You figure out how to save time and what's the shortest line or that kind of thing. But then things change, and all of a sudden you can't do it that way anymore. And the airline doesn't provide that anymore, and that's not complimentary anymore. And now you have to do several other steps that you didn't have to do before. And it can get really frustrating when what you've always known doesn't work anymore, or what you had a great system worked out, but now you can't do it that way. and now you have to learn a new approach, and you have to know to do it this way now. And for some people, that just wears them out because there are always things changing, and of course you have to stay up with a lot of that, and whether you've got people on your team that can help you, like I've got a bunch of millennials working with me that can sit me down and say, okay, that doesn't work anymore. They haven't used that in years, so better upgrade on that. But also I learned I just don't need to get too emotionally attached to things that are going to change anyway.
Yeah.
And of course you see that a lot in churches. The music's going to change, so there's no. I mean, I can have songs I like, but it's going to change. So enjoy it while you can, and things are going to change. And then there's other things that don't necessarily change, and you need to really learn to invest in those things that aren't going to change. And so relationships, people, your walk with God, your character, as far as just who you are, it can adjust, but there's some things that are much more long lasting than others. And so I just find myself, if I get all uptight because if those of you who travel know that after COVID, before COVID, like if you stayed in a hotel, they came in and cleaned your room every day. Now a lot of hotels, it's like, well, you can ask for service, otherwise we won't clean your room. And I think they tried to say that was protecting you somehow, by not having people coming in your room. But if you've got garbage piling up and soggy towels all over the floor, and you think, I'm not sure that you're helping me stay safe and healthy here by just leaving me in my debris.
Yeah, well, I think it's there's also the labor shortage. I think a lot of people
they're
are
saving wherever they can, and so now some hotels will still clean every day, but you don't know which ones. And I'm staying in hotels all the time, and so you have to. It's like before you didn't even have to think about that. You just knew that they'd clean out your garbage that day, and now it's. I've actually taken garbage with me out of my room and thrown it in a garbage bin, like if it's maybe a meal that I ate, leftovers or something, because I don't want it stinking up my room all night, and I know they're not going to pick it up. And so just little things like that, you think, I never even used to have to worry about that, and now I can't assume things I used to assume. And that can pile up emotionally on you after a while, unless you realize, okay, I guess this is how it is now, so I would just have to adjust to that. And so I think people that are going to thrive as leaders in the future are going to be people that don't let small changes especially wear them out and become a big deal. And I hear this when I'm traveling and in line and at an airport or something, and people will complain, well, we didn't used to have to do that. That's not how it used to be. Well, it's true, and it might have been better before, but that's how it is now.
Yeah.
And so,
well, and I'm finding we're not traveling a ton, but I'm finding having a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old that
change some things.
Well, and even just the little things, like I'm always having to check myself, because it's like our 4-year-old will suddenly want to sit at the side of the table that our 1-year-old sits at, and it's like, well, we've always sat and it's a little thing, but it's like suddenly it's really important to her that she sit where our 1-year-old is sitting. And it's like your first reaction is to be like, well, no, like that's not how that's not how it's been. But
we have our traditions.
Yeah, but then it's like, well, like, does that really matter? Like, is this a battle we want to fight? And so having to constantly just say, okay, does this change matter? Like, do I care about this change? And if not, let it go. Yeah. And if I do, figure out why I care and be able to articulate that to a 4-year-old.
Yeah. And we're swimming in a sea of change, and so you really have to just decide, I can't let every one of them take an emotional toll on me, or I'll be depleted all the time.
Right.
Well, the second thing I've just noticed, particularly in churches, but also just in business as well, is that it just seems like young people are major targets these days. It just seems as if the world is going after young people. The wokeness, all the different kinds of philosophies and approaches. Everybody wants to capture the minds of young people, um, and oftentimes when I'm out and about, I see young people and I just think. Man, it's tough navigating yourself as a young person right now. And whether you're in business, a lot of times I'm out and dealing with young people in the business world, and maybe kind of startup jobs, and I'll often ask them, what's your vision for your life? Where are you going? What do you, are you going to school? Are you planning, what kind of career would you like to have? What would your dream job be? I've asked a lot of Lyft drivers that question. And many of them aren't where they hope to be one day, but they're on the way. But there's so many temptations and pressures. I'm in a lot of churches, and I always have a soft spot in my heart when I meet young people. And I was actually this week in Virginia, in the Washington, D.C. area, and I actually spoke at a Christian high school and spent some time talking to young people. And it wasn't a massive gathering, but it was their 9, 10, and 11th graders, and in a brand new school. And I just wanted to speak hope into their lives and just try to encourage them, don't be afraid. In this confusing, often hostile world. And I was so encouraged by a bunch of them came around and they were telling me the dream that God had given them. And some of them were already making things happen and holding pretty large scale meetings and attempting really big things. And they were asking advice. And sometimes I'll go to a meeting at a church, and mostly, adults. And then there may be one lone teenager that came along with their parents, but they're really devout and they're just soaking it up. And while most of their friends are doing teenage kind of stuff, they're in this meeting listening to an old guy like me and taking notes and having questions. And I always try to take time. I just figure if this teenage kid or young adult is making this kind of effort to grow and hear from God, I really want to bless them along the way. And so that's just one thing I would just encourage our listeners is when you do see a young person, whether they're in the lobby of your church on the weekend, or they're serving you in a restaurant or checking you in at a hotel or whatever, just show some interest in them and encourage them. You have no idea sometimes what just a word of encouragement is. You don't know what all they're facing. But I just kind of have tried just to keep young people, especially, on my radar. And I do that also in churches, especially if I meet a pastor's kid, because I was a pastor's kid. But a lot of those young people have to be at church whether they want to be or not. Some of them God's going to use really mightily in the days to come. Some are under a lot of pressure to live up to in the fishbowl. And so there's certain kinds of young people that if they happen to cross my path, I'll always just stop if I can and just take some extra time with them. And so whether you're in the church or the marketplace, just keep an eye out for those kind of folks. A third thing is just I've just really noticed the need to keep a growth posture, just a constant openness to growing, just grabbing whatever you can along the way that will make you a bit better. The great thing, the great weapon in some ways of leaders is that they don't have to be stuck being the same leader year in and year out. They can grow. So you may not be all the leader that your organization needs you to be today, but you could be. If you keep growing, you will be what they need you to be eventually. And so, but what has struck me is that I'm constantly rubbing shoulders with both kinds of people. I'm rubbing shoulders with people just eager to learn, And then I'm also rubbing shoulders with people that just are not open to learn, and they don't take the opportunities that come along. And there are a lot of resources out there today to help people grow if they want to. But it always amazes me sometimes. And for instance, I spent a lot of time, and I've talked about this before, but I just still can't quite figure it out. I'm part of a lot of ministries to help churches be revitalized, churches that are not really growing or maybe even declining. And so we'll offer conferences to encourage people like that. We'll give away free books. We'll give them a great lunch. We'll spend one-on-one time with them in the breaks, just talking to them and encouraging them. And so you'll always have some people that will go to great lengths. We did a conference not long ago in Anchorage, Alaska, another one in Fairbanks, Alaska, or North Pole, Alaska. And I met a couple that had driven over 300 miles just to be in that conference, just to be for an evening conference for about 2 hours. They drove 300 miles to be there.
Which, to be fair, in Alaska,
you'd have to,
that's just sort of like a trip to town.
Yeah, that's right. But where they'd come out of was, and it was in the wintertime, and there was some challenges there. And then I'll be in a city, and I know full well that there are some pastors whose churches have been struggling for years, and they won't be able to drive 5 miles. Or I shouldn't say they won't be able to. They won't drive 5 miles. Yeah. And I'll look at that and I'll say, there's a reason some people's churches or businesses or careers are just a flat line, because they'll just think that they were too busy. And I'll think, well, were you really too busy? I'd love to know what you were doing that was so busy that, this whole conference is designed for people exactly like you. And yet you felt you were too busy. You've known for months this conference was coming. It's designed for you. We'll do everything we can to bless and encourage you, but you didn't come. And so I look at that sometimes, and I can't seem to understand why that is. And then I'll work with I do a lot of training, as you know, with business leaders, and these guys are busy, and some of these guys are running major companies, but then they'll jump on a Zoom call for an hour. I had just a bunch of folks this week, all of them CEOs of big companies, and a bunch of them were all jumping on a lunchtime Zoom call, just wanting to learn, just wanting to grow, or flying all the way to Dallas to the airport there to meet with me at DFW. And some of them are coming in on private planes to these meetings. They've got lots to do, but they value that, and they've got their notepads out, and they're asking questions, and they've had to set aside all kinds of important business just to be in a class for 24 hours. And I keep watching that and just saying, surely with all the challenges that we're facing in this world today, any leader has got to be just growing all the time. If you're not growing, you're falling behind. Mm-hmm. And yet I see people that just feel like they'll just keep doing what they've always done. And that just doesn't work, especially in this world that's changing as fast as it is now.
Indeed.
A fourth thing just to say is just this world is just filled with time wasters today. And it just, with so much to be done, you just can't afford to be wasting a lot of time. And yet there seems like there's more time wasters now than there's ever been. Yeah. And it's a great enemy, I think, of leaders is just being distracted by things that don't matter. And I see it all the time in so many different ways. I think about this a lot because I'm on airplanes all the time. And you get on an airplane, you've got a 2-hour flight, 3-hour flight, and I'll watch some folks. They've immediately got their laptop out, they're typing away. A lot of people still read old school books, like real books. And
that's encouraging.
They're reading away. They're working on notes. They're preparing for a talk they'll be giving when they arrive. And then you've got lots of people just watching TV, scrolling through cooking channels. Or sitcoms, and I realize sometimes the most important thing you can do, for me, sometimes when I'm returning from having spoken 7 times in a meeting or 9 times in a meeting, sometimes my brain is a little fried. So even yesterday, I was flying back from Florida, and I had spoken 7 times on that trip. And I even said to myself, I just need to veg here. It's not a real long flight. It's only about over an hour. I don't have time to get into a lot. Maybe I'll just lay my head back and just rest, because I got to hit the ground running when I get home.
Yeah.
But I did that about 10 minutes, and then I thought, I grabbed a book that I'm trying to read through right now and study, and thought I could get at least 30 more minutes of good reading in here and do something productive. And you and I both know that you can take that too far.
Yeah.
But I was looking at the other day just how much stuff I've even just produced in the last year or so, writing-wise, writing articles, writing Sunday school curriculum. And sometimes you're a little surprised. It's like, wow, I'm kind of, there's a lot of stuff that's come out. There's some articles I wrote a while ago that I forget about, and then I get a pile of magazines with my article, and I forgot I even wrote that, But and again, everyone's got their capacity and their calling, but I just find if you want to be someone who's getting a lot done, you're going to have to be continually fighting that battle against time wasters. And maybe just a fifth one for a break is just watch your attitude. I was in line yesterday to board a plane, and that's always a hard place for me with my attitude sometimes. And they had spilled something on a plane. I don't know how they did that, but they said, "Oh, we're sorry, we're going to have to delay boarding. We got to clean up a mess, a spill." But it took them about 20 minutes to do that. And then when that was done, they were ready to start boarding, and they were going to push someone down in a wheelchair. And I don't get this, but they said, well, they wanted to hold all the rest of us up until that wheelchair had come all the way back down the jetway. And I don't get that. They've already delayed us 20 minutes as it is.
But
and
Richard,
then,
you're so easygoing.
Yeah,
when it comes to travel.
it's so inefficient.
You're like, you know what?
It's like, why?
All you people, you guys bored. I've got nothing but time.
Yeah, you know me well,
Yeah.
Sam. It's like, okay, we're running 20 minutes late, so why would you not have us walk on down, at least line up just outside the plane? So as soon as that wheelchair the person's loaded in, you can start being seated. But that was a long jetway, so it's kind of like, okay, so now we got to wait for them to come. And when the person does finally come out with the empty wheelchair, they're talking on their cell phone, like they've got all the time in the world, and we're all piled up.
I've never known. I've never seen someone pushing a wheelchair in an airport that was in a hurry.
No.
Yeah.
And especially an empty wheelchair, and you realize they're not going to board until I get back off that jetway. But so anyway, I have constant battles, as you know, keeping a good attitude, and also sometimes just not being entitled when you're traveling and doing business and speaking. It's easy sometimes to think that you're a bigger deal than you really are, or just to get really. It's funny because yesterday, after several delays, finally I boarded, and the guy next to me was having an even harder time with his attitude, and I finally had to just joke with him, and like we both couldn't understand. It's an efficiency thing. Yeah. It's like. Yeah. Well, there's just more efficient ways to do this. Why would they? Here's a professional company. Why would they not do things the most efficient way possible? But then I kind of joked with him and said, if this is a constant battle to just keep your attitude, because otherwise you'd be miserable all the time if you let other people's.
Well, if you get bent out of shape at every inefficiency you come across, you're going to be a miserable person.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, life is full of inefficiencies.
And you get on an airplane, and you're going to find some miserable people, and sometimes they'll try to explain it, like they'll justify. They know they're being miserable, but it's like, well, but my flight was 10 minutes late, or
if you knew the day I had,
and it's like, well. I get that, but every one of us has to battle every day with,
Yeah.
am I going to be positive today? Am I going to let that get to me? Am I going to blow it off? I'm going to just kind of, and sometimes when I've had delays and now I might miss my connection. That's one of the more
Yeah.
stressful things. But I've even then I've had to say, if I miss my connection, I'm either going to, it's going to work out one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's not life threatening. I'm not flying to get a heart transplant today. So
Yeah.
if I'm late, it's, whatever, it's not life and death.
Well, and I think one of the things that helps get you out of that attitude adjustment is seeing someone who's further down the bad attitude track than you are, and it says, okay, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I know what I might look like in 10 minutes if I keep going, and so that can kind of help bring you back.
And you see social media now, people with bad attitudes are venting there all the time, and you just realize, I'm responsible to guard my own, and nobody wants to be around someone that's just ticked off at all the stuff that annoys them every day with other people, and so that's a battle. And so when you travel, you see a lot of people who have lost that battle.
That's true. Well, let's take a quick break here before we wrap up.
Hello, I'm Richard Blackaby, and I'm the author of The Seasons of God. And I want to introduce you into a 6-week online class that Blackaby Ministries International is offering, where I'll be walking with you to understand how God has designed our life to flow through seasons. Life's not meant to be lived in a straight line, the same thing day after day. God constantly is introducing new things and changes and adjustments. He's starting certain things and He's ending other things, and it can often confuse you. This class will walk through how our life flows through seasons, and I think you'll be surprised to look back on your life and realize God has been doing amazing things ever since you were born, and He's got some wonderful things still in store for you in the days to come.
Well, Richard, we normally take these breaks in the middle, but we're a little on the back end here. So
you got me rambling on here of all these observations.
Just, you start talking about the woes of air travel.
That gets me going.
That train is hard to stop. But just as we have a few minutes left here, I know you've got a couple other observations from your travels.
Yeah, sixth thing is God is at work. One thing I would have to say is everywhere I travel, and oftentimes God is not necessarily working where you would expect. And so, I often saw that with my dad. He would go and speak in front of thousands of people, and you think, wow, this is such an important meeting. But then it would be a conversation after the sermon with somebody just had come up and waited to talk to them. And you felt as if that might be the most important thing, that this whole trip may have been just for me to speak into that person's life or encourage that teenager who respectfully waited in line and just wanted to ask a question. And so whether it's talking to a Lyft ride, if it's who's talking to someone sitting next to you on a plane, just expect, I would just say expect that God is going to be working around you, and just keep your eyes open, and you won't be disappointed. A seventh thing that I've noticed is excellence stands out, and in a world in which a lot of people are staffing, or they're shorthanded, or they don't have the budget they used to have. There's a lot of places trying to cut corners, provide less service, or they're just hiring people that aren't high quality workers, and so you almost get used to not expecting very much, not expecting to get a lot for your dollar. And then all of a sudden you encounter someone that does things with excellence, and it's like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I was just at a great church yesterday and the day before, and it's a big church, but you could just tell everybody does things with excellence, whether the people are just providing some food in the green room or driving you to the airport or whatever it might be. You could just tell this has a culture of excellence, and everybody takes pride in their work and doing everything well. And again, I can't emphasize enough, whatever it is God's called you to do, if you make a habit of striving for excellence, it's amazing how many doors that opens for you. How many people want to be a reference for you later, or want to recommend you somewhere else, or want to do business with you, and so that's again, I've just been reminded every time I do experience real. Sometimes it's someone waiting on me at a restaurant, but they went the extra mile. On this last trip, I had someone else that gave us our menus, and then we didn't see them for 20 minutes, and they happened to walk by. It's like, hey, we're ready to order. Oh, are you already? It's like, well, yeah, we're all fairly decisive people. 5 minutes is more than enough to look over a menu, or I don't know where you've been, oh, okay, well, I'll be back in a minute. Like, yes, still longer, but but then there's other people that just are they're not in your face, they're not obnoxious, but boy, they're right there, and they're helpful, and they're delighted to help, and you think, wow, I'd come back here over and over again just to get that kind of service. And maybe one last thing is just you're going to always deal with hits and misses. When you're traveling, when you're leading, when you're called to serve in various ways, there are going to be times where you get a base hit, but you certainly don't get a home run, or you might just flat out strike out and think, ouch, like that just didn't go as well as I hoped it would. And then there's other times you're going to just really make contact, and you're going to have that ball go a long ways. And of course, everybody wants the hits, they want the successes, but there's usually a smattering of fails, or at least, kind of weaker efforts. It just didn't quite connect like you hoped it would. And at the time, you were looking at those notes and thought that'd be a great presentation, but they just didn't respond quite like you hoped. And so I've just learned, when you are having successes, lean into it, get all the fruit from that, all the value, the mileage you can. When you fail, sometimes I still lean into that and say, so what do I learn from that? How would I do that differently next time? Maybe it's a different kind of thing than you've done before, and you realize, I was kind of feeling my way through that, and I realized some things not to do next time. Make a mental note there, because if I ever do this again, I'm going to do it this way instead. And but as you travel around and just see various businesses and churches and leaders, you're going to notice people as well that are doing it really well, and some that aren't, and be taking note all the time, because you're going to always encounter both. And so, how do you get mileage out of hits and misses? So that regardless of what you're experiencing, you grow personally, and you learn to lead even better.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you for walking us through this, and I know you'll have a lot more travel coming up, and we'll have to do this again sometime, so thanks.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.